very warm welcome. I'm Laura Bicker from the BBC. I will be moderating this panel discussion. In just a few hours' time, President Moon Jae-in will become the first South Korean leader to travel to Pyongyang in over a decade. And boy, does he have a job to do. Talks between the US and North Korea have stalled. Can President Moon, the mediator, get things back on track? Well, we have a top panel to discuss all of this for you. With me to my left is Professor Yoon Kim. Now, he's a member of the National Security Advisory Committee. He's been in a number of talks with the North Koreans, and in fact, last Friday was there as the Kaesong office opened. Thank you very much for being with us. Further to my left is Professor Hyun-wook Kim. He is professor at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy, and one of his research areas includes the US ROK alliance, which I'm sure will come up today. And to his left is Harry Kazianis. He's a director at the Defense Studies at the Center for the National Interest. He is a renowned expert on security issues across Asia, including in North Korea. And we're very happy to have him. He's come all the way from Washington, so he's suffering a little from jet lag, but we'll help him get over that. So before we discuss all of these issues, let's remind us of the journey to get here.
한반도에 더 이상 전쟁은 없을 것이며 새로운 평화의 시대가 열리고 있음을 함께 선언하였습니다.
우리가 지금 서 있는 가슴 아픈 분단의 상징인 판문점이 평화의 상징으로 된다면
Our unprecedented meeting, the first between an American president and a leader of North Korea, proves that real change is indeed possible.
Well, what a year, what a journey, but so far to go. What are the main hopes for this third Inter-Korean summit? Well, let's start with you, Professor Kim. What do you hope to see in Pyongyang?
Yes, this trip actually has two dimensions of advancement. One advancement is advance from the Panmunjom Summit, Panmunjom Declaration. So we need to materialize, have more concrete agreement on inter-Korean relationship or reducing the tension militarily. Another dimension is, right now everyone knows, U.S. North Korean dialogue kind of stalled. So we need to have some kind of mediating role and to put life in it. So actually it is indeed this situation is stalled. One key solution is right now is how much concessions Moon Jae-in can get from Kim Jong-un and bring this to the U.S. to persuade U.S. next.
Professor Hyun-wook Kim, I mean, if I can speak to you, this is being hailed as a kind of make or break summit for President Moon. We heard there about detail. What detail do you think he can get from North Korea?
I don't think anybody would know that right now. Maybe President Trump knows it. Maybe, maybe not. But I think President Moon Jae-in and Chairman Kim Jong-un, they might have talked about it already throughout the high-level talks that they have. There have been a lot of diplomatic connections recently. South Korea and North Korean delegates and high-level officials, they have communicated. I think most of the outcome of the summit meeting, they already have, I think. Some of the important residues of what they have to talk, the two leaders have to talk and decide, are the ones that have to be filled within this statement. But most of the outcome, I think they already have talked and discussed and agreed. Special Representative Steve Biegun have visited Korea twice. I think that means that still the U.S. is curious about what two Koreas are talking about, the denuclearizing issues, what he wants to hear about it, and what kind of messages is the U.S. messages he's delivering to the South Korean delegates. So I think the talk is still ongoing. We don't know what the details about. There are some rumors. A lot of media reports are talking about the rumors.
Media, we're never to be trusted.
Okay. Rumors are there. We don't know, just rumors. But my personal opinion is that it is not easy for Kim Jong-un to listen to what Trump says, which means that I don't think it's easy for Kim Jong-un to begin with, declaring what it has. It's a very tough decision for Kim Jong-un because he cannot trust Trump. President Trump has, the U.S. has midterm elections early November.
But the South Korean envoys came back from North Korea and said that Kim Jong-un trusted Donald Trump.
Yeah, they have a good trust relationship. But I don't think Kim Jong-un is sure whether Trump will win the midterm elections. What will be the situation within the U.S. government next year. So if I were Kim Jong-un, I would just wait and see what's going to be the outcome of midterm election.
We're obviously on the kind of Washington discussion, so that brings us neatly to you, Mr. Kazianis. So when it comes to what we're hearing from the Trump administration with North Korea, are we getting mixed messages?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think for U.S. foreign policy right now, especially in Asia, we're at an inflection point. For those of you who are watching financial markets very closely, you understand that the United States is more than likely going to enter in a trade war with the People's Republic of China. And that is going to have huge ramifications for U.S. policy towards North Korea, because to be blunt, China is going to be America's focus in Asia for the months and years to come. And that was the way it was supposed to be when the Trump administration took office. Go back to the end of 2016 when Trump won the election. He brought in advisors, people like Peter Navarro and others, that were the hawkish of China advisors. And they were itching for a fight with China. Their goal was to contain China. But we have a meeting between Donald Trump and President Obama where President Obama has to break the news to him that Kim Jong-un in North Korea, and specifically North Korean ICBMs, are going to be your biggest threat, and they might be your threat this year. And the Trump administration had to change tack, to be honest with you. But what I think is happening now is I think the Trump administration is essentially going back to its original posture in Asia, which is they're coming to the realization that, comparing threats between China and North Korea, for America, China is the much bigger threat. In fact, to be very honest with you, if North Korea did not have nuclear weapons, I do not think the United States would be as concerned about the North Korean issue. So I think we have to look at it, the whole situation for the Trump administration and for its Asia policy through that China lens, because it's very important. Because in the days and weeks ahead, if America does get into that trade war, it's going to be very important. One last point on America in sort of its role here in this discussion. Donald Trump needs a win. Donald Trump back home in Washington is having some severe problems with his policies. He has the Mueller investigation that's breathing down his neck. He's tweeting about it all the time, so you can see that. He also has a Supreme Court nominee that is very much in trouble. And a lot of conservatives went with Donald Trump because they thought that he could bring home conservative control of the Supreme Court. That's very much in jeopardy now. So I think Donald Trump is looking at all this. understanding that China is not going to back maximum pressure anymore. He needs a win at home. That might give some impetus for him to be a lot more flexible in North Korea and want to be the president that ends the Korean War. I think it's possible.
Professor Kim.
Let me add to it. Actually, this is not only a trust game they decided to play, but go back to the practical matters. Actually, going back to the, mistrust structures, but Trump and Kim Jong-un decided to play trust game. But at the same time, it is like a pride fight. It's a game of pride. It's not just emotional pride. Actually, Kim Jong-un leadership and Trump leadership is based on this pride. So they're stuck. This is like a too proud tennis player. The ball is stuck in the net, and nobody is going to get it but Moon. Moon is going to get it and continue to play, make them continue to play. And as Dr. Kasianis talked about it, talked about the flexibility, possible flexibility of Trump, and I agree with it. But I think he's still debating whether to go on with this some kind of status quo, because the game is not broken down, and North Korea has no more provocations, and POW remains returned. So this is not enough, but I can carry on until the elections. Or if Moon brings the big, like a shocking concession, I hope, to him, then he's going to take it and then do something in a breakthrough and then use that for his election.
You say shocking concession. Are you talking in terms of North Korea maybe handing over a list of weapons, for instance?
Right. There are two kinds of concession. I call it shocking. Number one is complete declaration. So, and report of nuclear program list. As Dr. Kim Hyun-wook talked about, it's not going to be easy for him to report. But if he did, it's a shocking concession. Another one is it's more political, it's showing off. Exhibition is partial destruction of weapons or missiles.
I mean, we're talking about shocking concessions. Do you, Professor Kim, think really we're ever going to get these shocking concessions? Surely, North Korea is just keeping this on down the line, kicking it all down nicely, keeping it all simmering away while trying to further inter-Korean relations? No? When it comes to the shocking concessions, what do you think the chances are of North Korea giving President Moon a shocking concession?
As I said, I think North Korea would be balanced in its approaches towards South Korea and the United States altogether. It would not give up the imminent core of its nuclear capabilities. It would begin with something residual. It did already, for example, giving up the test sites of nuclear weapons, destroying the test sites of ICBMs. And what's the next thing? I think the facilities and materials and nuclear warhead, the core of the nuclear capabilities. So if there will be any concessions by North Korea to the United States or to President Moon Jae-in, I think it would begin with the facilities. That's something that they're allowed to give to the United States at this juncture. If there is any positive measures by the Moon Jae-in, mediating ideas, which I think will be delivered to the President Trump. The question is whether this is something that has been already well coordinated with the United States. If this is something that has been already accepted by the United States. If that's the idea, if the summit meeting, I think, would definitely come up with an agreement, which would give subsequent, events to be alive, in October, November, December, on and on, I think.
What is the minimum Washington would accept, do you think?
We don't know. And the reason I say that great answer is because we don't know what Donald Trump will accept. In a lot of respects here, we have almost two U.S. administrations. We have sort of the hawks on North Korea, the John Boltons, you can even say Mike Pompeo and others that are very much for, North Korea denuclearizing first before any major concessions are given. And then we have Donald Trump. And to be honest with you, it's very hard to sort of understand what is going through Donald Trump's mind. And I think a great sort of analysis point to sort of figure that out is look at the Bob Woodward book that just came out. I mean, it's very clear that Donald Trump has a very different sort of decision-making process. Many times he does not listen to his advisors. He sort of goes ad hoc in trying to sort of figure out what his strategies are going to be. So there's sort of this X factor with Donald Trump. I have a feeling, though, that President Trump at the moment, like I said, understands that he has problems at home, and he understands that China is not going to enforce maximum pressure anymore. If you put those things together, I think it makes Trump realize that he's going to need to be flexible here if he wants to be that president to end the Korean War. And I really do think he wants his Nobel Prize. So I think he's going to do a lot to get there. And I could even see him, to be honest with you, saying, okay, Kim Jong-un, if you're not going to make sort of that big concession now, well, I'll make the concession first and I'll give you that peace declaration. But the cost is going to be that I want something in return after that.
Professor Hyun-wook,
Yes.
you're raising your hand there. It was,
Yes,
was it a mention of Trump Nobel Peace Prize winner, or what was getting to you?
Adding to the current commentator, I think what is important. This is just what I think. Just correct me if I'm wrong, because you are the U.S. expert. I think there is the good word that was said by Professor Junhyung Kim is the flexibility. Might be bad, but I think I would like to interpret it in a good way. The Trump's flexibility. Last year's China policies and North Korea policy of President Trump, and this year's China policy and North Korea policy is very much different, I think. Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe he's getting to know better. I'm not sure he knows enough. But his policy is changing a lot. Maybe he used North Korea policies in order to bash China last year. But bashing China was not enough. But this year, he's serious bashing China in trade terms. And I think in doing that, I think is beginning to decouple China and North Korea. I think he's now beginning to embrace North Korea in the process of denuclearization, but at the same time decoupling China and North Korea and bash China more and more. So I think in the sense, if North Korea kind of concedes to Trump what it wants moderately, not totally breaking out the frame of negotiations, I think the frame itself will go on in the future, even next year. That's what I predict.
We say that China and North Korea are being decoupled here, but at the parade last week, they looked very, very much together as they held hands during the parade. Professor?
Yeah, but I'm not sure that Trump has that kind of holistic mindset that connected these two at the same time. I don't think so. Sometimes he thinks differently. So pushing China and bashing China is one thing. And another thing is winning or making this work is if his achievement, then he will go for it, even if it's not coherent between the two.
When it comes to a peace or the prospect of some kind of end of war declaration, when it comes to the wording of that, one of the most important things is the potential the troops here in South Korea. 28,500 US troops based in South Korea. There are fears that an end of war declaration, which North Korea wants, South Korea also wants, there are fears that would affect the troops. Is there a way of having some kind of peace declaration and still keep those troops here?
Yeah, it is very important because we always think about our fear of the North, but think about the North Koreans and Kim Jong-un. So even if U.S. declined to give declaration the ending war, but at least South Korean presidents going there have something going on that gives some comfort to North Korea. And then to add that, North and the South Korea have been doing so much work to reduction of military tension and the building confidence building. Yes.
Gentlemen, thanks for the moment. We have a guest via Skype. It's Rüdiger Frank, who is head of East Asian Studies at the University of Vienna. Mr. Frank, thank you so much for joining us on Skype. If I can ask you, what are your main hopes for this third Inter-Korean summit? Do you expect President Moon to achieve any detailed denuclearization measures?
Well, I don't think that this is really about detailed measures for denuclearization. It's about keeping a process going, laying foundations for further agreements, and especially providing a little bit of support for Donald Trump for the stalled talks so far, so to achieve a little more progress.
I mean, the US is obviously looking for more action from the North. How likely is Kim Jong-un to comply, given that he appears to really want that end of war declaration?
Well, I think Kim Jong-un and the North Koreans in general have shown a great willingness this year of cooperation and providing merely symbolic acts so far. But at least that's more than they have done during all the last year. So I think we could see possibly a continuation. But then also, as the North Koreans have been telling us via the media, they are slightly disappointed about the reaction by our side. So I think it's really imperative that President Moon makes sure that Kim Jong-un understands that we are also doing our share, and that might lay the foundation for further steps.
I mean, Kim Jong-un has long promised his people economic reforms. It's now the key pledge of his leadership. Can Moon Jae-in help with that without violating UN sanctions?
Well, that's, of course, a very tricky question. A lot, I think, depends on the UN itself or the UN Security Council, how it interprets those sanctions. We see that in Washington, there is a lot of hawkish talk about a very strict interpretation of those sanctions, but then there's China and Russia. They might have a different opinion. So the whole thing is not really limited to the two Koreas, but also the international community really has to play a role in how far this can go or whether the whole thing will stop and stall.
I mean, lastly, what do you hope to see by the end of this summit this time around?
I don't know what will happen, but I do hope that the two Koreas will take further steps towards taking their own destiny into their own hands. I think setting up this liaison office in Kaesong is a major step, and I would like to see more of that. Of course, there is international law, there are international sanctions and everything, but at the end of the day, it's the Korean Peninsula, and it's the Korean people, and it's their interest. And if a war breaks out, they will be the first victims. And if North Korean people suffer, it's Koreans who suffer. So I think this is what they should focus at. Stop looking too much at partners. Partners are important and allies are always welcome. But it's Korea, it's Korean destiny. And I hope to see more steps towards this goal. Inter-Korean cooperation should be one of the primary objectives of this meeting.
Mr. Frank, in Vienna, thank you very much. Let's pick up from there. This is the Korean Peninsula. These are the Korean people. You were there as the Kaesong office opened. What was the atmosphere like while you were there?
Let me say that. Yeah, I went to Kaesong complex. First of all, it was well maintained by the North, so it's clean. Of course, I saw this signboard like a sale. It was 2016, February, but it was sad to see. I was sad to see that, but overall maintenance, it was good, and the whole mood for ceremony is more like a controlled. We're happy, but because of U.S. does not like this, so it's like a more like controlled mood, but it's a big historical step. And I was touched by this historical event. So I'm not in the government, but I think South Korean government think like this. We are kind of one step forward, not completely we going all the way without considering U.S. North Korean relations. It's like one step ahead, but not damaging or not harming the U.S. pressure, which is a pressure system, which is a sanction system. Very careful about it, but at the same time, we need to kind of some guidance, give guidance to U.S. and the North.
So basically, we're talking about President Moon, the mediator here. Professor Hyun-Wook Kim, when it comes to the two Koreas working together, do you think UN and US sanctions will get in the way, or are things that the two Koreas can do together without violating these sanctions? Are there economic? Do you think economic prosperity is the way for the two Koreas to go? Are there ways that they can work together, perhaps on the rail projects that President Moon has promised, to try to bring the two Koreas closer together without violating UN sanctions, obviously? That's fine. I mean, when it comes to the sanctions, yeah, go on.
Okay, I'll help you. Okay, because the sanction, we all know the sanction system. So this is like a limitation, actually, that even though many, CEOs and all the tycoons going with President Moon, but I don't think there can have a real, genuine or concrete, some kind of economic cooperation or project. I don't think so, but they will talk about it, but not in written form because of the sanction system. The same context that I talked about the Kaesong, regarding Kaesong opening ceremony of Kaesong liaison office, just like that. So, but I think it's three parts. One part is the economic cooperation. It's like a low key, low profile, and biggest thing and the thing is a concrete resolution of reduction of military tension. That part, I think, they were. Agree in big step. Other things that I talked about, resuscitation of U.S. North Korean dialogue. That part, that's the key. But they cannot put it into written form. Even if President Moon can get some concession, he cannot, announce to the public. It's just bring this to Trump, and use it to persuade Trump.
I mean, Mr. Kazianis, the UN is actually going to have an emergency meeting. The US has called an emergency meeting of the UN in just a few hours' time to discuss sanctions. Obviously, Russia and China may get in the way of any of those discussions or any action. But is this a sign that the US is still determined to pursue maximum pressure?
I think at the moment they are determined to keep maximum pressure going, but I do think there is a realization in Washington that if you are going to go after China in these different trade matters, maximum pressure is going to probably fall apart. If it already hasn't, when you think of Donald Trump shaking Kim Jong-un's hand in Singapore, I think that itself would really lend itself to being, creating a lot of problems for maximum pressure. I mean, leaders that might be inclined to trade with North Korea are probably thinking to themselves, well, if Donald Trump is willing to have a summit with Kim Jong-un, why should we keep enforcing the sanctions? I think a lot of the issues that are going to happen at the UN, quite soon, have a lot to do with Russia and trying to make sure that the Trump administration is showing the American people that they are being tough on Russia, considering what's happening with the Mueller probe and all of that. So I think North Korea is part of that discussion, but again, it comes back to U.S. domestic politics.
When it comes to the ROK-US alliance, Professor Kim, when we're looking at this, you're looking at President Moon trying to pursue an economic policy here, and the US might not like it as much. Do you think there's a potential for a rift in the alliance? Microphone, yes.
I think that's the biggest concern the US has. I think it's a bigger concern the US has than whether North Korea would denuclearize itself or not. When the Moon Jae-in government began, one of the concerns that the Washington, D.C. People were talking to me was, okay, another progressive government in South Korea, Kim Dae-jung and the U.S. Bush government, and Roh Moo-hyun and Bush government, we experienced a weaker alliance. That's what they're concerned whether that would be repeated again. And I think, the weakening of the alliance, the less cohesiveness of the alliance between U.S. and ROK, I think is the biggest concern the U.S. has right now.
The U.S. or the Trump administration, or?
Oh, you want me to have a more specific answer? Okay. I think many Korean people are worrying about that too. And maybe not President Trump, but many elites and US people are worrying about that. And I think President Moon has been balanced so far very well. He did not only focus on the North-South detente, but also focused on the US allocate coordinations. But things will be not easy in the future. Okay, North-South detente will be accelerate as time goes by. The U.S. and North Korea negotiation frame will continue in the future. Okay, it will go on and evolve on and on. And what if in the end, North Korea announces, okay, not satisfied, no more denuclearization. And what happens? Detente is there. U.S. will go back to maximum pressure, as you mentioned. And that would result in the U.S. allocate alliance weaken. So that's, I think, something we have to be worried about. That's why a lot of people are talking that there should be balance between detente move between North and South Koreas and denuclearization issues. There should be balanced approach. And I think President Moon Jae-in has been done this very well, balanced so far.
It's a difficult line to walk because you're trying to kind of keep a relationship with North Korea, while at many occasions the U.S.-North Korea discussions are not going well. I mean, Professor Kim.
You know what? We're always like this. It happens all the time. Whenever we have a disagreement, even though it's not that big, they jump to the conclusion that we have a problem, an alliance. And actually, these two governments are well communicated and talk to each other almost every day. Of course, yeah, something, this is the natural alliance. But here, it's conservative camp always think it's some kind of disagreement or progress, or one step, as I said, it's a half step forward. I should say not one step, half step ahead. They don't like it, that means rift, some kind of problem in alliance. I don't think so. I really don't think so.
Well,
but some kind of framing is going on. So that's why I'm worried. If President Moon couldn't bring some kind of concession from the North, and then all the criticisms will rise and to attack this government. I think President Moon knows that, realized that. That's why this is like a last resort, that President Moon take advantage of it, full advantage of it.
I mean, when it comes to the ROK-US alliance, anyone who's read the latest revelatory book by Bob Woodward, the first chapter is actually about South Korea and Donald Trump writing up a paper to rip up the chorus deal. I mean, when it comes to the ROK-US alliance, there have been moments that it does seem that his advisors have really tried to keep him on track.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we think about President Trump in terms of his overall foreign policy vision, in a lot of respects, his vision was formulated in the 1980s when there was trade battles with Japan, and he looks at it from that prism, and he looks at all of these trade deals. And what's fascinating about Trump is he remembers. He might not know every IR theory that's out there. He might not even be able to find North Korea on a map, but he could probably tell you the trade difference between the United States and South Korea and the United States and Vietnam and the United States and Japan. He looks at things from a very different prism than I think everybody on this panel does. Economics and business for him are key. He looks at things as win or loss. It's very much a zero-sum game. I just want to go back to for a second on the idea of denuclearization and what that's going to take for a moment, because I think we need to be very clear-eyed what that's going to take. We're talking about a North Korean nuclear program that might have as many as 65 nuclear warheads. Now, I know that's at the very top of the range, but North Korea has a very mature, pretty developed nuclear program. This is not Libya we're talking about here. I know John Bolton is trying to say, oh, they could denuclearize in a year or 2 years. That's impossible. This is going to be, in perfect conditions, a multi-year or maybe decade-long effort. And that's where I think a lot of the problems start to really sort of fester, because even in perfect conditions, like I said, it's going to take a long time. Has there ever been a 10-year period where the United States and North Korea have gotten along, have had good relations, have not had some sort of crisis? Maybe Kim Jong-un is a different leader. Maybe he's different than everybody else who's come along. I don't know. But when we think about denuclearization, I think we have to think of how long that's going to take and all of the different problems that can happen. So that's why I think it's very important that we do have some sort of peace regime that was actually, you know, set forward in the Singapore summit. Because if we're going to go down this path of denuclearization, to have better relations, to not go back to fire and fury again, there's going to need to be political discussions and a political process to resolve differences when they come up. Because we cannot get into a situation again where Donald Trump goes on Twitter again and makes threats, or Kim Jong-un makes corresponding threats and tries to say, oh, I'm going to launch a missile at Guam. We might not escape that as lucky as we did last time.
So this has to be a long-term process with long-term leaders invested. But part of the problem is you have an American president who may or may not be in power, promises made, promises sometimes not kept when it comes to moving on into another administration. I mean, when it comes to the North Koreans, do they distrust what's coming from America?
Yes, actually, I met a high official from North Korea in Helsinki last March. They said they were so stressed about the regime change in the South and the US. Because whenever they agree something and the next regime just broke it. So I think it's really, they looked genuine actually. They were so stressful. And you know, Kim Jong-un talked about he wants to achieve denuclearization within the end of, or by the end of first term of Trump administration, right? So that's a big statement, I think. If that's true, actually, Jung Eung, the NSA National Security Advisor, delivered the message. But if it was true, that's a big statement. Then we all know that it's going to take 20, 30 years, and especially CVID. I call it CVID fundamentalism from within the U.S. They cannot actually accomplish in my life, actually. You know, it's almost like you're religious. That's why I call it fundamentalism. But what does that mean? 2 years, 3 years? And actually, President Trump talked about 20% irreversibility of denuclearization right after the summit. I think we have to pay attention to it. So we declare, I think it's political decision that when we call it denuclearization. And then after that, we need to have a firm or solid monitoring system. We cannot have complete and nobody have any doubt on it. It's impossible. It's like 2 or 3 decades. So somehow, some kind of irreversibility we have to achieve until the end of at least the first term of Trump administration. I think we have to work on it.
Professor Kim, I see you nodding along. You agree? This has got to be a long-term process.
Yes. Whether Trump knew it or not, I think right after the summit in Singapore, he had a 1-hour speech, right? And I think
it was very, very long. I think it went on for an hour and a half.
Yeah, no, exactly 1 hour and 7 minutes. I was doing,
You were timing?
Yeah, it was 1 hour 7 minute talk, and he clearly mentioned that it's not realistically possible to completely denuclearize North Korea. Maybe, I don't know, he said maybe 20%, some level that is irreversible denuclearization would be something that he would be aiming at. So he knew that CVID is realistic impossible. So I think what the U.S. wants now is within 1 year or 2 years would like to establish some level of denuclearizing North Korea, which they judge politically or technically thinks that that's sufficient level of denuclearization. But I think there should be clear timeline, I think. It should be 1 year or 2 years. And based upon the timeline, we have to judge which level of denuclearization is something acceptable within that timeline. That's something we have to agree upon.
And I think that's crucial. I think people are waiting to see exactly what will be acceptable to whom. When it comes to Kim Jong-un and President Trump, it seems clear that Kim Jong-un wants to deal directly with Donald Trump and not perhaps as gatekeepers. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very clear reading the Woodward book, looking at just decisions he'd made. I mean, look at his Twitter feed. He was willing to sort of negate Rex Tillerson when Rex Tillerson had ideas about North Korea, H.R. McMaster, others. So I think it's clear if you're going to want to have, you know, fruitful talks with the United States, you need to be talking with Donald Trump and trying to talk to Donald Trump directly. One other point I just want to bring up that one of the other panelists were talking about, I think it's important that we talk about sequencing. There's a lot of talk about this in Washington about who goes first, you know, what steps are made. I think we need to scrap that whole concept. I think if we're going to make smart results with North Korea, everything needs to be steps where people are going together. So for example, if there is going to be a peace declaration, I think for whatever North Korea is going to offer, we need to be doing these things at the same time. Because I think both sides are afraid that they're going to lose face. So we need to take that off the table. I think if we can achieve that, I think we're a little bit closer to getting to our goal, to be honest.
So what's the first step? Is the first step North Korea giving a list of weapons? Or is the first step the peace declaration, an end of war declaration?
I think what you could end up seeing at the end of this is I think there could be getting us very close to a peace declaration. And there's a lot of things that North Korea could do to sort of make that happen. I mean, for example, it was suggested by Bruce Bennett from the RAND Corporation back in 2013 that maybe North Korea, as a show of goodwill, gives up one nuclear warhead to the IAEA, not to the United States. So the United States doesn't get any intelligence advantage out of that warhead, but that would be a very strong signal. Another thing that could be done, for example, is Kim Jong-un could get a full list of his nuclear warheads and missiles. Not the locations, because Kim is afraid that would be a target list, but he could give a 5 or 10-page dossier that says, I have 48 nuclear weapons. These are the yields. This is how many missiles that could actually be used to launch a nuclear weapon. I think if he did that, that would be a game changer, and I think that would help earn a lot of trust with President Trump.
Is sequencing important?
Yeah, yes, definitely. Sequencing is important. And actually, because this is trust game, but they're not mature enough to play this, you know, trust game. So you first, you come first. And then that's the issue, right? So, but we didn't lose everything. Now it's clear what kind of exchange right now is trade-off. We have a trade-off is, you know, nuclear report program list for declaration of ending war. So that's why, you know, President Moon tried to have like this simultaneous exchange. And when the South Korean special envoy to North and Kim Jong-un said, they delivered the message, Kim Jong-un said, sequencing. So he said a declaration of ending the war first, but he's ready to somehow, he seems to ready to give up something. So why don't we do that at the same time? But the sequencing is giving a concession from our side, and then right after, or almost simultaneously, he can give up or report the program, nuclear program list, or plus, and then some kind of destroying the missiles and things like that.
Do you think a simultaneous agreement is possible?
Well, I had a little bit different impression from, you know, Professor Jun-Hyun Kim. You know, National Security Advisor Jung Yong came from Pyongyang's visit, and what he had briefed in front of press was that Kim Jong-un, you know, Chairman Kim Jong-un has done much. He's expecting something from the United States. You know, throughout all his briefing, you know, sentences, that was the key of what North Korea wants from the United States. There was nothing that he would do something first before the U.S. gives something to North Korea. So I'm still not sure how successfully two leaders, you know, in two days would meet and come up with some kind of coordinated, you know, ideas, you know, that would, you know, make the U.S. and North Korea to evolve, you know, in the future, continue their frames. Maybe there comes a lot of creative ideas, but we'll see how it, comes up with an agreement. I really don't have any specific ideas yet.
Gentlemen, this is my favorite moment. We get to turn around and ask people what they want to ask. Does anyone have a question for our panelists? Please raise your hand. A microphone will come to you, and you can tell us your name. A microphone's just winging its way right now.
Mangjusok, Sky News, United Kingdom. First of all, thank you very much for your insightful presentation regarding North Korean issues. What I'm trying to say is the United States concerns that the latest approaches in inter-Korean ties are not helpful with progress denuclearization talks with North Korea, because economic sanctions are now still going on, against the North Korea. And United States demand, complete denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. Under current situation, do you think a low-key economic cooperation between Korea and North Korea would be possible without violating the United sanctions? And second question would be, war declaration might be connected with dismantling the United Nations command. They just say like that, I'm not sure. And in final case, it might be connected with complete withdrawal troops from the United States from the Korean Peninsula. What do you think of that?
So who would you like to ask first? Professor Kim.
Kim Jun-young.
Okay, thank you for picking me. Okay, I'll answer briefly. Number one, low-key economic cooperation. Even though it's low-key, if it's a concrete cooperation agreement, I don't think U.S. will be happy with it. So I don't think President Moon will do that. And then what else they can do it? They try to prepare and talk everything possible, not agreed in concrete form. So even though low-key economic cooperation can violate this sanction system, I don't think President Moon is confident enough to go on, push that. The second piece, the issue of declaration of ending war. And actually, some part, Chairman Kim Jong-un talked about it. Always suspicion from the U.S. that if, declaration of ending war, then no more armistice agreement effective, and then no more UN and no more U.S. troop. But Chairman Kim Jong-un said, I'm not going to do it. And actually, U.S. and South Korea had agreed before about this under the Bush administration, 2007, when the first time that declaration issue of ending war issue came up. 4 conditions agreed between the U.S. and the South Korea. Number 1 is no hostility. Number 2, no war. That's common sense. Number 3, so until the peace agreement, armistice and the declaration of ending war going together. That's coexisting. That's very important part. Number 4 condition is denuclearization and peace process is always going together, not separately. So I think that kind of agreement can be put it into if U.S. and South Korea agree the declaration of ending war.
Does anyone else want to tackle that question?
I just want to add one small thing. I think that after we come up with an agreement about the declaration issues, peace declaration issues, I think a lot of people in South Korea and a lot of people and elites in the United States would not allow the U.S. forces in Korea to be withdrawn back to the United States so quickly. I think it will take a lot of time, and a lot of government people and politicians, elites, public would not like that idea at all. But one person I'm kind of worrying about. You know who it is. So
no.
I'm worrying about President Trump. seriously, he's looking at the alliance from a different perspective, completely different angle. When he visited South Korea and when he visited Camp Humphreys, which is the hub of the U.S. forces in Korea, the first thing he talked about was that I came here for the jobs of the United States people. I really couldn't understand why he said that at that place. So I'm worrying about him. I'm worrying about him more than, other people.
In that case, without declaration, he could do it. Why is it related to declaration? I think I agree with him. He can pull out the U.S. troop, but even without declaration of ending war, he could do it.
The whole America First strategy.
Let me just put it this way. Yes, Donald Trump talked a lot about during the campaign about removing troops from South Korea, trashing the ROK alliance, trashing Chorus, But think of it this way. Donald Trump is an optics guy. He cares how things look above all else. And his advisor is going to tell him, look, if you start pulling troops out, imagine the pictures that are going to be on social media of U.S. troops pulling out of their camps, getting on boats or ships or C-130s or whatever, and leaving. The first thing that American elites are going to say in Washington is this is American decline. And let me tell you, he is not going to want to have that on his watch. So bottom line, U.S. troops are not leaving South Korea unless there had to be something massive, some sort of massive game changer, but it's not going to happen.
Would anyone else like to ask a question? Raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. Yes, at the front.
Hi, I'm Sophie Zhang from CNN. I wanted to ask Director Kazianis, you talked about it would be great if North Korea sends like a list of nuclear weapons without locations, but what do you realistically expect to come out by this Wednesday, out of the summit?
Well, I think it's tough to predict, especially when it comes to obviously North Korea. I do think Kim is going to make some sort of concession. And it could be something that we're not seeing at the moment. I mean, it could be some sort of nuclear list. It could be that he agrees to give up one nuclear weapon. He could potentially even agree to say, if you're willing to give me a peace declaration, I'm willing to make a permanent ban of testing nuclear weapons or ICBMs. So I think there's a lot of different pathways to get to some sort of peace declaration. But I think Kim Jong-un is smart enough to understand what's at play in U.S. domestic politics. And I think he understands that the game changes if Donald Trump loses the November elections. Because if he loses the House and the Senate, Democrats are going to try to impeach Donald Trump. And at that point, Donald Trump is either going to do one of two things. He's not going to care about North Korea, or he's going to go back to Fire and Fury 2.0 to sort of distract from that. So I think Kim probably understands that this is his best chance, probably in a long time, to get some sort of lasting peace regime going with the United States. So for Kim, I think it's a smart play to give up something to keep things going. Even if his tactic is just to stall, by giving up something, he's guaranteed that the ball keeps rolling in his direction. So I think he's going to give up something. What that is, tough to say.
Well, gentlemen, we're coming very near to the end. I just want you to say very, very briefly, in about 10, 15 seconds, what would be your best wish to come out by Thursday?
I want President Moon to be a guarantor, not just mediator, guaranteeing U.S. intention to the North, Kim Jong-un, and Kim Jong-un's intention to the U.S., the best guarantor.
I expect something to come out from the summit about the denuclearization issues. If there doesn't, I don't think there will be meaningful summit between U.S. and ROK at the UN General Assembly. There will be no U.S.-North Korea summit meeting, no peace declaration. And if that happens, and along with possible defeat of midterm election, that will be disastrous.
You've got 20 seconds.
All right. So I think what happens is I think Kim does end up giving up something. But more importantly, I just don't want to go back to Fire and Fury. I don't think we all realize how close we came to nuclear war. Just very quickly, I do a lot of wargaming, and the last wargame I did where there was a U.S.-North Korea nuclear conflict, 8 million people died, and that was a conservative estimate. So let's never go back there.
Gentlemen, I think we can all agree and end on that note. Thank you very much for your time indeed. And thank you very much for joining us. Time flies when you're talking about geopolitics. We have a lot to look forward to over the next 3 days. What exactly will President Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un talk about, and will we get any of the results that the panelists wish to see? Thank you once again for joining us, and stay tuned over the next few days. And I'll do this the Korean way. 감사합니다.